We will fight so that we retain the inalienable rights given to us by the U.S. Constitution. We will educate ourselves to know how our democracy works. We will make calls, attend commission meetings, protest, march, create connection, and build community. Democracy will not die while we watch. We will fight and we will win. All right. Next slide, please, Mako. All right, this is the Lace Up and Learn newsletter. If you are not one that reads the news regularly but want to be informed, one more slide. So the Lace Up and Learn newsletter is so you don't have to be overwhelmed by all the news that's coming out. Let me do that, and you just can get bite-sized bits of the news. All right, next slide, please, Mako. All right, so this is what our class is on today, the Black Civil Rights Movement. Today, we embark on a journey through the Black Civil Rights Movement. A story not just of laws and dates, but of human courage, sacrifice, courage, and resilience. This was a fight for dignity, equality, and justice, led by ordinary people who faced extraordinary challenges, from the pain of segregation to the power of collective action. This movement is about you, because its legacy calls on all of us to act today. Imagine being told where you can sit, where you can eat, where you could learn, just because of the color of your skin. Imagine risking your life just to vote. That was the reality for Black Americans, and their fight changed the entire world. Let's dive into their stories and ask, what can we do to carry this torch forward? All right, next slide, please. All right, so we're going to talk about the roots of the struggle. We're going to spend the shortest amount of time on the longest amount of problem, slavery. But I want to highlight a few key points to this era. So the Civil War was from 1861 to 1865. It ended slavery with the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments. These amendments gave freedom, citizenship, and the right to vote, but only for Black men. However, by the 1880s, so-called Jim Crow laws were put into effect, essentially negating what the amendment's intent was. These laws enforced segregation across the South, and they included things like separate schools, separate restrooms, water fountains, even hospital wards. Do you know the inventor of a blood transfusion was a Black man, and he actually died because he could not be admitted to the hospital they wanted to take him to, and he needed a blood transfusion because it was a white-only hospital. So that tells you the lunacy of Jim Crow laws. These were never separate but equal, because the Black facilities were always underfunded, dilapidated, and dehumanizing. Now, in 1896, right before the turn of the century, the Plessy versus Ferguson case came in, and came in front of the Supreme Court. Homer Plessy was a mixed-race man from Louisiana, and he decided to sit in a whites-only train car to challenge the law. He got arrested, and the case went up to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court held that segregation and separate but equal was constitutional. So this basically enshrined separate but equal segregation for decades. Now, let's talk about Anna Julia Cooper, because we're also going to talk about the heroes. We're not just going to talk about the bad times. We're really going to focus on the good times. Anna Julia Cooper, this is her picture on the slide. She was born into slavery in 1858, so right before the Civil War. After the Civil War, she was freed. She got educated. She got advanced degrees, PhD, and she began teaching at Black schools. She faced racism and sexism being a woman, but she wrote a book called A Voice from the South in 1892. She argued that Black women's education was an uplift to the whole race. And really, we have seen time and again in different nations that the health and well-being of women shows the health and well-being of the society. So her courage and her voice laid the foundation for future activists. Let's go on to the next slide. And this is going to be, the movement is going to be starting now. We're going to jump ahead. There was still work being done, but we had 2 world wars. We had women's suffrage that happened. We had the fall of the Gilded Age, the rise of progressivism, and FDR. So we had a lot going on during that period. And unfortunately, the Black civil rights movement got pushed to the side because of everything else. But now we're in the 50s and 60s, and it's going to start heating up again. And that starts with 1954 Supreme Court case, Brown versus the Board of Education. I know we've all heard this case. We know it. But let's talk about what it really did. So Thurgood Marshall, who is the one pictured on the slide, was a young lawyer with the NAACP. He actually went on to become a Supreme Court justice. And he argued that segregated schools violated the 14th Amendment. The Supreme Court actually agreed in this case, making school segregation illegal and unconstitutional. Integration faced a lot of resistance, though. Some schools closed rather than integrate. Now, next slide, please. Now we're moving forward a year, 1955. I know all of us have heard of Rosa Parks. What you might not have known is she was a seamstress and an NAACP member. And 2 or 3 years before, there was a 15-year-old girl, I can't remember, Colvert, that refused to give up her seat. But because she was a teenager and there were other issues, they decided not to make this a test case. When Rosa Parks did it, they made this the test case. So when this happened, Rosa Parks got arrested. When she got arrested, one of my favorite stories when I was researching this is of Joanne Robinson. She was a professor and she led the Women's Political Council in Montgomery, Alabama. Well, the night of Rosa Parks' arrest, she mimeographed, and that's the early version of copying for the young people. She mimeographed 35,000 flyers saying, boycott the Montgomery bus system. Think about that in one night. And in 1955, just all night copying to make these flyers, to hand out, to get this movement started. Now, Edie Nixon, a local activist, was the one that organized, after Rosa Parks got arrested, the Montgomery bus boycott. For 381 days, Black people who made up 70% of the bus line's customer base walked and carpooled. They did not use the bus. And the only way this boycott ended was when the Supreme Court heard a case and made bus segregation illegal. And then the boycott ended. So this is a direct result of the power of protest and boycott. All right, we're going to go to the next slide. And this is the Civil Rights Act of 1957. Now, although this sounds like a great thing, oh great, we're getting civil rights in 57, it was a largely symbolic act. And the reason for this is there weren't a lot of enforcement provisions. It did create the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights. And the interesting fact about this bill is Strom Thurmond, who a gay Leatherman friend of mine had dinner with because his parents are ultra-Republican, was a Republican senator, very racist, homophobic, so everything. And he did the longest filibuster on record to that point in 1957 against this bill. You know who broke that record? Cory Booker earlier this year. He was the one to break this record by this racist POS. And I love that. A black man took it down. And that's the one we'll talk about. So anyway, let's move on to more positive action. Let's go to the next slide, please. And we're going into the 1960s now. Sit-ins became a thing, and the way they became a thing is that 4 black college students in Greensboro, North Carolina, went to a Woolworth's lunch counter and they sat and politely requested service. They were refused, and they sat there all day until it closed. The next day, 24 people came back and did the same thing, and day after day after day. And this was such a popular form of protests that within weeks, the sit-ins had spread to 7 states. And think about that. This was before the internet, and long distance calls were expensive. So imagine how this spread back then. Letter writing and those expensive calls, those long distance calls and flyers, and the logistics of creating this movement at that time without our tools is mind-boggling. So anyway, these people faced harassment. It wasn't just sitting there. They were spit on, ketchup was thrown in their hair, violence was enacted towards them. However, we had a woman, Diane Nash, who was the leader of the Nashville sit-in movement. She trained the protesters in nonviolence, enduring arrests and threats, and how to handle these situations. Her leadership helped desegregate Nashville's lunch counters, and she inspired others and taught others, each one teach one, how to do this in their community. And that's what we're doing here today, how to get involved in your own community. Now we're going to go to the next slide. Ruby Bridges in 1960. This picture is Ruby Bridges at 6 years old being escorted to school, to kindergarten, by federal marshals. So in 1960, she was the first student to integrate an all-white school in New Orleans. There were protests and screaming and, just everything. There was one woman, and this is the one that gets me. She held up a child-sized coffin with a black doll inside. I mean, think about that, the kind of hate and vitriol you have to have in your heart to do that to a 6-year-old child. But this is what she faced every day, day in, day out. Ruby's teacher, Miss Barbara Henry, taught Ruby Bridges alone because the white parents boycotted the class. And Ruby, in later years, she said 2 quotes. I couldn't decide which one to use, so I'm going to tell them to you both. I wasn't afraid. I just wanted to go to school. And I refuse to believe there is more evil than good. And this is from a young woman who faced that during her formative years. Imagine the strength that takes. All right, next slide, please. We're moving up, and again, the children are leading the way. In 1963, the Children's Crusade started in Birmingham, Alabama. What happened was the black parents, the mothers and fathers, men and women, and even people that weren't parents, were afraid to protest because when they protested, they were likely to get fired. They were likely to have job insecurity. So the children took up the cause, and over 1,000 protested. They faced police dogs. As you can see from this picture, this is a real picture from the Children's Crusade of police dogs attacking a child during a peaceful protest. And these images like this really shocked the world and started making people pay attention to what was going on. That's one of the things I do not want to see that happen. I want there to be peaceful protests. But sometimes when stuff does happen, and we know this, George Floyd, Trayvon Martin, the list can go on. But I especially think of George Floyd because of the recording and the immediacy of that. The immediacy of pictures like this shocked the nation. And that's something that happens during peaceful protests. Sometimes things go wrong and we get horrible pictures, but they move the movement. All right, we're going to, next slide, please. 1963, the famous March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. Now, what most people don't know is that A. Philip Randolph, who was a labor leader of the time, was the one that organized this march. That's why it's for jobs and freedom, because it was also a labor march. Well, labor and racial inequality are inextricably linked, because when unions are in effect, people who are in the minority get a better deal, and it's fair across the board. It is not based on skin color, it's based on union strength. So this showed the possibilities and the force and the power of coalition building and working with other movements. 250,000 people gathered for this march. And and you can see the picture here in front of the Lincoln Memorial showing the Washington Monument. Of course, everybody also knows the March on Washington as when Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. gave his I Have a Dream speech, which called for unity and equality. Next slide. 1964, we're moving along. So, as you can see, each action is building on the one before. We get a little bit further, and trust me, this class was 2 hours long before I cut it. We are skipping great piece of information. I tried to fit as much possible in as I could, but I didn't want it to go on forever, so we're at a 1 hour class. So, the Civil Rights Act of 1964. This was proposed, and a big proponent of this was John F. Kennedy. And in 1963, Kennedy was assassinated. And people who were proponents of the Civil Rights Act were really worried that the incoming president, Vice President Johnson, would not see through with this vision. Well, Johnson made it his personal mission to make sure Kennedy's legacy lived on and passed this act. And you can see Martin Luther King Jr. shaking President Johnson's hand on the signing of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Now, what did this act do? It banned segregation in public places, created the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, and protected voting rights. The other great thing it did is Title VIII came into being, and this prohibited gender discrimination in hiring, which was a win for women when we really needed one. Because remember, this was 1964. My mom couldn't have a checking account in 1964. She couldn't until 1972, the year I was born, have her own checking account. So in 1964, this was a win for women. All right, next slide, please. All right, now 1965, the Voting Rights Act. This is the one that put some real teeth into getting voting rights legislation passed. This was after decades of voter suppression. Imagine having to take a literacy test, and if you failed, you couldn't vote. Or maybe you'd have to pay a poll tax. So if you couldn't afford it, you couldn't vote. Or maybe they just forgot all that and just outright intimidated you with threats of violence. That's what was happening to Black people and people that tried to register them to vote, people that tried to hold voting drives, people that were going to vote were intimidated ceaselessly. Now, this act outlawed all these discriminatory voting practices. To show how needed this act was, in Selma, Alabama, the voting population of Black people, it went from 2% registered to 60%. 60%. Showing that intimidation and these literacy tests and poll taxes had done their job of effectively disenfranchising Black people in voting. Next slide, please. And of course, we come to 1968, when Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated at 39 in Memphis, Tennessee. Riots erupted in over 100 cities, And it was hard losing a leader like Dr. King. But other leaders rose and took his place and saw his vision through and continue to fight. And we are the direct descendants of that. All of us who are interested in racial justice and social justice, our time is now to carry on Dr. King's legacy. And one of the great things about it is just a short time after he passed, days after, the Fair Housing Act passed. Another barrier to generational wealth. Because if you don't know, one of the best indicators of generational wealth in the United States is home ownership, property ownership, real estate. And for years, we'll talk about that in this. Actually, I'm going to talk about it now. For years, there were practices like redlining. And those practices meant that banks would not, they'd redline a community where Black people lived and would not lend money for home loans in that community. Now, these were made illegal by the Fair Housing Act. So, in fact, I am a Florida real estate broker, and I have to take an ethics course every 3 years, and that is one of the things. They usually have a civil rights question on that course. And for all people that deal in real estate, we don't even think about it anymore. It's just the way it is. But that wasn't always the way it was. All right, next slide. All right, we're going to talk about protest techniques now. This is where we've talked about the history. Now we're going to get to the techniques, how they did it, and what we can learn from this, and how we can move forward using these for the modern time. So the first thing they did was nonviolent training. Learning to be nonviolent. I am the worst at this. Not that I'm violent, but when I'm at a protest and I'm standing along a sidewalk and cars are going by and a Trump supporter rolls up and Trump, 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 I have to say, bless your heart, you must have a tiny penis. I just can't help it, but I really know I should not engage because that escalates situations, and that's not what we want at nonviolent protests. So I'm working on it. So they practice staying calm while being insulted or attacked. So every time I get insulted or I hear that, I'm practicing. I don't always succeed, but I practice. Progress, not perfection. They did targeted actions, sit-ins, boycotts, freedom rides, protests, marches. They showed injustice visibly, things that got on the news, that got in the papers. Nowadays, it's things that trend on social media. But they forced society to confront the faces of people these policies were directly affecting. And the last thing they gave us a lot, but the last thing we're going to talk about is community organizing. Churches, the NAACP, student groups, they built networks of support. And we call these networks today mutual aid networks. And we're going to talk about that in a future class. So next slide, please. Now, protest techniques now. Of course, what is the biggest change in then versus now? Anybody? Maybe social media? I'm going to guess. But of course, it's technology and social media. We are connected like they couldn't be. They had phone trees. We have phone banking. I mean, we have so many different things that we can take advantage of to make this organization a force to be reckoned with. When we are organizing to fight and protest, we have all these resources at our command that our ancestors would have killed for. So, hashtags. The hashtag Black Lives Matter started in 2012 after Trayvon Martin's killer was set free. It went viral globally. It wasn't just an America thing. It went global. Live streams amplified protests instantly. We saw boots on the ground right there, right then, right on our social media, right on our phones. Symbolic acts. Colin Kaepernick was a football player. And in 2017, he started taking a knee during the national anthem to protest police brutality. And it became a firestorm. everybody was worried about him being a communist and the this and that and the other thing, when in fact he was doing what Rosa Parks did, what Homer Plessy did. He was doing silent, nonviolent protest. And it was very bad for his career, but he felt that strongly about it. He wanted to make that choice. Global solidarity. Like I said, the Black Lives Matter hashtag went global viral. And in 2020, when George Floyd was murdered by police, it sparked protests in over 2,000 cities and 60 countries around the world. From 15 million to 26 million people protested. This was the largest global protest movement in history. So now we're going to move on to some ways we can do it now. Next slide, please, Mako. This would be slide 18. Modern protest ideas, economic boycotts. And you see I got a big old target with a no through it. Now, the great thing about economic boycotts is you can do it on a large scale, like the Target one, or on an individual or family scale. For example, piercing, both permanent and temporary, is part of my spiritual path. It's part of my BDSM path. It's why my name on most social media is Ms. Pierced. I do not shop at Claire's or any other store that pierces with a piercing gun. I feel they're unhygienic. I feel they're dangerous. I feel the people aren't trained. And I feel there's a plethora of opportunities to get it pierced at a reputable piercing shop with a needle in sterile conditions. So you know what? That's my personal boycott. You don't have to boycott it. It's not your boycott. But one of my exes was a union member. We boycotted Walmart. We would not shop there because of their quashing of unions. So pick the cause that works for you or join a global boycott like the Target one. The interesting thing is, just like the Montgomery bus boycott, Target is seeing their sales decline every quarter this year. They were expecting a modest increase. No. And that's the power of the dollar. Now, if you want to research brands and find things that you shop for that align with your values, there are two good apps, No Thanks and Goods Unite Us. Those are both apps, and it's No Thanks and Goods Unite Us. You got it? I saw somebody reaching for their phone. And I will also send these out. These kind of resources I send out regularly in the newsletter. I just found one called Red Hen, which is for shopping sustainably from local farmers. And they deliver, or you could pick it up. And I'm like, oh, I can't wait to try this. So another way I can do it. You know, and these are not hard actions. Download an app, look up a few things. Easy peasy. All right, next slide, please. Oh, no, we're on the same slide. Stay there, Mako. I forgot. Digital activism. Amplify Black voices and content creators. When George Floyd got murdered and I saw that video, that was my wake-up call. I started following Black content creators. I started reading Black history. I've read The Color Purple. I've read Roots. It was 900 pages and one of the best books I've ever read in my life. I've read My Bondage and My Freedom by Stephen Douglas. I've read the collected works, the speeches of Stephen Douglas, who was an abolitionist and was a former slave. I educated myself. I didn't go to Black people and say, teach me. I said, I'm going to follow you and I'm going to learn. And then I'm going to go educate myself. And then I'm going to go educate others. Because if you want to be an ally, that's what you do. So share petitions, fundraise, or share stories of injustice. Those personal stories are so important because it humanizes the movement. Politicians don't. People do. And then use hashtags to trend items strategically. When something's going on, post, hashtag it. Even if it has nothing to do with it, hashtag it. You want to trend that post, that hashtag. Community organizing, that's what we're doing right here. We're organizing a community. There are so many ways to get involved. Indivisible, 50-51, hands off, no kings. All of these movements are flourishing in South Florida. And I go to meetings, there's 100, 200 people there. So there are people that are going to be with you. Go and find them. Find the ones that align with you. And you want to create safe spaces for dialogue about systemic racism. This is an important one if you are a white person, especially, because you have a responsibility to educate yourself, and then not only educate yourself, but live those values in the way you talk about things to other people. We're going to talk about a way you could do that. The Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Boca Raton is going to have a film series on race, the power of an illusion, and the slide's going to be in later in the presentation. So if you're interested, we'll talk about that in a few minutes. And that is a great place to create a safe space to talk about systemic racism. Creative disruption. This is one of my favorites. I'm an art collector. I'm also a creative person. I scrapbook and rubber stamp, and I make cards, and I paint, and I do all sorts of things. And I love seeing art installations. In fact, one of my favorite things at protests is that people create digital protest signs, print them out large format, and then hand them out at protests. Sometimes they're on cardboard, sometimes they're just a piece of paper. And I've already gotten 2. And I love it because it shows what they're passionate about. And it's art, and it's beautiful, and it's just awesome. So if that is where your talents lie, think about creating signs. You could just put them online for free. Download this sign now, whatever size it is, if that's your passion. The other thing I see, one of my favorite examples of this is the Tesla takedowns, where they took videos of Elon Musk giving the Nazi salute and broadcast it on the side of Tesla buildings, and then videoed it. And that was a very powerful art protest. The other thing to think about is things that are community art projects, like in 2020 when the Black Lives Matter murals on the streets appeared. Now we have rainbow crosswalks that keep getting, in Delray Beach, that keep getting vandalized, but they keep putting them back up. And I love that and support that because that shows commitment. Okay, yes. So protesting the current regime. So in 2025, voter suppression laws, book bans, and attacks on DEI signal a backlash. We had such progress for so long, we are now getting a backlash of it. So what you can do to protest. Marching. I know I talk about it a lot. Marching, standing at protests, sign waving, writing letters to the editor for the op-ed page. Politicians read these. It's an important skill. If you're a writer, use that skill. Support legal challenges to book bans like organizations like the ACLU. And then volunteer your time with organizations like the NAACP or the Innocent Project, which fights to get wrongful convictions overturned. All right, next slide. Let's talk about the modern parallels, what we're seeing going on again during this backlash period. In 2025, this year, 19 states, 6 less than half, in case you were wondering, have enacted voter suppression laws. That is frightening. They target Black and minority voters the most. Things like ID requirements, reducing polling sites so you have to wait for hours in line to vote. and felony disenfranchisement, making it hard to get your voting right back after you have done your time and done your probation. Police violence. This is another way history is repeating themselves. Over 1,200 people were killed by police in 2024. Black Americans are 3 times more likely to be the victim of police violence. The Innocence Project continues to expose these injustices and tries to get these people released. The next thing, the wealth gap, wealth inequality. This is the statistic that should truly make you see the racial disparity in income. Black families make 13 cents for every dollar that white families have. 13 cents! That is a ridiculous percentage. This is rooted in those historical policies I talked about, redlining, ways to access generational wealth were cut off for most Black Americans for a majority of the 20th century. So now that Black people are finally starting to be able to buy homes and do things, what's happening? We're getting another backlash. We're getting more wealth inequality. We are focusing, I saw a sign for a trans march the other day, so we are focusing on the wrong 1%. And we shouldn't be focusing on trans people, we should be focusing on the billionaires. All right, cultural backlash. Over 2,000 books, many about race, were banned in schools from 2021 to 2024. Curricula on Black history is being censored and erased and rewritten. And we don't even talk about Indigenous history, because that's the Department of Homeland Security posted a painting. It was showing Manifest Destiny. I can't remember the artist or the painting name, but it was showing Manifest Destiny, which was white man's destiny given to them by God to move forward west. And in the painting, you see Indians being pushed forward away from their land. And the Department of Homeland Security just posted this. And you know what? They capitalized to Homeland and Heritage. They're both H names. They capitalized both. You know what HH stands for? Heil Hitler. They gave a racist dog whistle on the Department of Homeland Security. We should be outraged, but this didn't even get a look. They are rewriting history and they're limiting curricula. They are trying to intimidate our universities. They just intimidated Columbia into giving them $200 million. They bowed. They bent the knee. Thank God for Harvard holding the line. It's one time when I'm glad the cultural elite have a school of their own, because they're fighting for us for once. We're in a backlash era, folks. But history shows progress always follows. Look at the Gilded Age, followed by the Progressive Age. Look at Jim Crow, followed by the Civil Rights era. And now we are dealing with Trump. And we have the opportunity to be the next great civil rights age in the 20s and 30s, because this ain't going to be just for the next 5 years, people. This is the long haul. Let's talk about Alicia Garza, and that's her picture here. She was one of the co-founders of the Black Lives Matter movement. She was a community organizer, and she used Twitter and created the Black Lives Matter hashtag, which went global. She was threatened with death regularly and threats of violence. But she persisted. She said, we don't need permission to demand justice. All right, next slide, please. All right, how to resist in 2025. Vote and protect voting rights. Register voters, monitor polls. Be a poll worker if you can. Challenge suppression laws with groups like Fair Fight. That's their logo right there. They are specifically, if your main passion is voting rights, check out Fair Fight. Educate. That's what we're doing right now. We're educating ourselves. Educate yourself outside of this. Read. Watch influencers you like. I watch a lot of history influencers because I like history. And they give nice little sound bites. And if they have longer ones, I watch those too sometimes, Host screenings like of the films like Selma and Roots, things like that. Have those cultural dialogues about systemic inequalities. Share resources. Support Black businesses. This is a big one. There is this candle maker. Their name is CTOAN, and I'll put the link in the video when I upload this to YouTube. They are a Black, queer, non-binary person, and they make fat-centric and fat-positive candles. And I have in the trans pride colors, I have a fat woman torso and a fat woman's hips and legs sticking up. And I don't burn these candles. They're too pretty. But I love them, and I spent the extra money for them because this was a Black, queer-owned, non-binary business, and I wanted to support. Not only did they have a product I loved and wanted, but I wanted to support their business. Advocate locally. For the last 2 months, I've been at the Palm Beach County School Board meeting because they were trying to get rid of DEI policies because the Department of Education told them, we'll take your funding if you don't. We told them, look, you're not going to lose your funding. The courts are on your side. They still voted no. And everybody that was there, nobody spoke in favor of this. Everybody spoke against it. When we got up to leave, there was a quiet moment in the proceedings, and I yelled cowards because I was so angry that they did not listen to their constituents. And you know what? I will remember every single school board member because only 2 voted with us. I will remember every single school board member, and I will try my hardest to make sure they're not elected again. Book bans are a big thing. School boards listen to that. In Palm Beach County school systems, though, we have library, we have no banned books. I can check out all the banned books I want. I even checked out one called Queer Joy is Resistance. And I was like, I love that my library has this in Boca Raton. Push for DEI and inclusive curricula. Join movements, volunteer with Black Lives Matter, the Innocence Project, or local justice groups. Show up at protests and town halls. Our Congress people are coming back for recess. If they have a town hall, go to it. All right, next slide, please. Now, this right here is not exactly on topic, but it is. My congregation, the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Boca Raton, is holding a 4-part series on a film called Race, the Power of Illusion. It is 3 hours long, so what we're doing is we're having 4 sessions. So August 3rd, 17th, 31st, and September 14th from 1 to 3 in the afternoon on a Sunday afternoon. We have an hour of the film, and then we have an hour discussion. The reason I'm saying this here is that it's also going to be on Zoom. You can come to the congregation in person, or you can watch and participate on Zoom. So if you are interested, Mako, could you put the Eventbrite link that I sent you into the chat? And if anybody here is interested, see me after, and I will make sure you get the information. I don't have the QR code with me. Sorry. All right. Now, let's do a little personal reflection. We just went through a lot of history and activism in a very short amount of time. So what injustice today makes me angry? What is your primary passion? What is the thing that you care about the most? So anybody here want to share that?
Books.
Books? Books, absolutely. That's one of mine. And the cutting funding to public libraries as well as book bans. It's in fact, one of my protest signs for the Hands Off protest said, hands off our libraries, because I feel that strongly about it. Thank you, Master Laurent. Anybody else have any issues? Yes.
Civil rights, specifically immigrants' rights and trans rights.
Civil rights, specifically immigrant rights and trans rights. Of course, you know that ICE currently has almost 60,000 people in detention. A lot of them have been flown out of the country. We don't know where they are. Not to their country of origin. They're taking them to third world countries and dropping them. Syria, El Salvador, who then transferred them to Venezuela, where we heard about them being abused horrendously. This is scary. Immigrant rights are the frontline issue right now. And trans rights are always their fallback. When they can't think of anything else to talk about, they pick on the wrong 1%. They pick on the 1% of trans people. Because not everybody knows trans people. Not everybody is familiar with using they and them pronouns. And it scares them because they don't have the knowledge. So they use it to scare their base. Anybody else?
The new executive order that forces institutionalization of homeless people or people with mental illness.
Yes, yes. They have turned over Medicaid records. And there is a new executive order that basically you can be detained for being mentally ill or being, what was the other one?
Either homeless
or homeless.
So
yes, if you
ADHD, bipolar, any of those things, but the forced institutionalization means that you can't have a psychiatrist say no, they are competent. Like it takes away all of that due process rights, and the only way to get out is if you follow all of their things they want you to do. So they'll take off your meds, they can force you to do things, and generally you have to pay for those programs.
Yes, and it is scary that they are criminalizing mental health and homelessness.
And they'll say that being transgender is mental illness.
Yeah. Do we have any questions in the chat?
In the chat, we have a comment about that democracy is very important to them.
Democracy, yes, we are fighting against an authoritarian regime, also known as fascism. We are fighting against that right now, and our democracy is truly at stake. So, I'm going to ask you, with all these good things that we can fight against or fight for, what actions can you take? If it's just to educate yourself and vote. If you want to get more involved, volunteer your time. If you don't have the time, give some money. If you can't do that, post content of other people and get that word out. Be known. I swear, I have people sending me political content all the time now because they know this is what I'm passionate about. Be that person in your friend circle. So that I have people that watch my feed just to get their political news. And I take that seriously. It may not be a many, but I take it seriously.
Do you know what this injustice that is like just priceless?
What?
5 calls.
5 calls.
Because you know why?
Why that?
You don't have to talk to anybody. You can just tell your address and leave a message. I love that. I don't want to talk to anybody.
Yep. Master Laurent said 5 calls, which was the app we downloaded last month. She used it, and she can just leave messages for her reps and senators. She does not have to talk to anybody, and it gives you the script. You don't have to think up what to say. You just leave your address and your script, and it's perfect. It's a way to make your voice heard, and they have to tally every single call. So call. All right, thank you, Master Laurent. All right, everything counts. Do what you can. All right, next slide, please, Mako. Conclusion. The civil rights movement never stopped. It's alive in every protest, hashtag, and vote. From Homer Plessy to Ruby Bridges to Alicia Garza, ordinary people made history. Now it's your turn. In 2025, we face new challenges: voter suppression, police violence, and cultural erasure. But we also have new tools: social media, global networks, and our voices. Don't wait for a leader. Be a leader. March, protest, organize, disrupt. Do not comply. As John Lewis said, if not now, when? If not us, then who? You are not the future. You are the now. We are going to write the next chapter of justice together. Thank you. We got a few more things. Next slide, Mako. All right, this is our action for this month. Everybody get out your phones. It's phone time. So, yes, if you want it, Master Laurent, just write me, and I'd be happy to send it all to you. Okay? Say, what was that app or what was that thing? I'll be happy to send it to you. Or if you want any of these materials, you want the PowerPoint, you want my notes, I will make them available free of charge. If you just want them for your archives or you want to give this class, feel free. Okay? So ResistBot, this is a great thing. Text to 50409, text the word resist. Now, what ResistBot does is ingenious. You can write in, there's four actions: trending, and it'll give you petitions. So any trending petitions, you can decide whether to sign it with a yes or a no. Write or call for contacting officials. A lot of times when there's an action coming up, ResistBot lets me know and says, would you like to send a letter to your representatives or senators? And you could put yes or no or ignore it. Then we have protests to see nearby protests. You put in your zip code, which is how it knows everything. Oh, Mako, would you put to slide number 24, the ResistBot slide? Thank you. And then the other thing you could do is buy. You don't have to do this, but if you want to send it by letter or by fax, you can buy coins and they'll send it that way for you. You don't even have to send it. They'll do it all for you. So the great thing I like about this, I get to sign petitions and I get to write letters easily to my Congress people in addition to making the calls. So it's a great little app. Thank you to Libby Warren for giving it to me. I appreciate it, Libby. I use it all the time. All right, next slide. So as always, we are going to close our meeting with a call and response that I find very helpful when doing social justice work. We are going to sing this 3 times. And then we're going to have the last slide, which will be the contact for boots on the ground. And then we're going to close the meeting. We're going to also, but before we do that, does anybody have any questions or comments? We good? Anybody in the chat? We're good? Good. And how many people are in the group, Will?
8.
Thank you. Okay, cool. Thank you. So we are going to sing this 3 times. So if you want to join, feel free. If not, I will sing alone. All right, let's take a deep breath. And out. Loosen, loosen, baby. You don't have to carry the weight of the world in your muscles and bones. Let go, let go, let go. Loosen, loosen, baby. You don't have to carry the weight of the world in your muscles and bones. Let go, let go, let go. Loosen, loosen, baby. You don't have to carry the weight of the world in your muscles and bones. Let go, let go, let go. Thank you. Next slide. And if you want to contact us, we have Facebook and Instagram, we have email, and we have the website, botgfl.com. Thank you for John, House JBX, for hosting the website for me. I appreciate that. Thank you for Chuck and Greg of the Eagle Wilton Manors for allowing us to meet here and always being there for the community. And thank you everybody that attended today. I appreciate each and every one of you. Take care.